Aman!
It is time for you to be equalized.
You fool. You've never faced bending like mine. What are you?
I am the solution.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Writer's Block, episode 4. And whenever I realized it's episode 4, I kind of thought, wait a minute, we're kind of running out of episodes here, because I mean, we're covering quite a lot in this episode. I'm not sure if we'll make this a two-parter, because this is a pretty big topic we're going to talk about, and I don't think it's one that would be very well covered if it was just in one hour period or something. But anyway, I am here, P-Dog, along with the TheAireaidLord, Chris, who is also here.
Hello.
Yes. And basically, we are going to talk about characters. Now, at this stage, we've already talked about our backgrounds and our history of writing, the different forms of writing, and then last episode we talked about stories and plots and endings and beginnings and intros and ends and stuff. And this time we're going to talk about characters, and characters are obviously the main focus on anything. Unless it's like a complete fact book, there's going to be a character in whatever you read. Whether it's going to be like someone that you follow, whether it's going to be like an overseeing type thing where you see a whole pile of characters around and it's based on like a series of characters. It can go pretty. It can be pretty well developed in all kinds of like media texts. So you can do it in literature. Or in movies there are also characters, and in advertisements there are characters and roles. I actually prefer to call them, I don't really like calling them characters, I prefer to call them roles, to be honest, but that's more of like a media terminology than a literary terminology. So, if you do want to create characters, depending on the genre that you want, you can vary quite a lot, but the main thing that you'd probably think about is trying to make them quite realistic, and trying to make them believable, and to try and if you're going to create like a new image of people or characters, then you have to try and portray them quite well and execute, how they behave and stuff, because it'll be the first time your audience will be seeing it. So consider a lot about what your characters are going to be like. So I guess we'll start from scratch a bit, I guess, and begin right with the very first character that you'll probably be creating, which will be the character that will move the narrative, and the character that you will be most primed in on. And that is the protagonist, who is the central character in the narrative. He or she, or it, is the person or thing that basically moves the story, and everything is like evolved around them for the most part. Everything story-wise is evolved around them. And so the audience will be most in tune with them. And so characters can come in all kinds of different forms and shapes. And basically, it's interesting to see where these characters come from. So if you were to talk about a protagonist, look no further than Noah Jefferson / Rickshaw, who is the protagonist in the Ord series, or the Noah Jefferson / Rickshaw series, written by Mr. Leduc right here. And basically, what did you like come about around creating this Noah character, who's going to be the central character for pretty much every book in this bar one?
So, as we go deeper into these discussions, I find myself referencing back old things that I said in previous episodes, and I'm going to again reference something I said in I don't know if it was episode 1 or 2, but I said that writers write about themselves most of the time. And we brought this topic up when Pete was describing his Machinima series, where it was really the intro focus, at least, was around these 4 friends who had developed a friendship around a game. And now that times have changed, for him it was a way of going back to that point in time. So for me, with Noah Jefferson, or a spoiler for the book, but he does eventually find out that his identity is a little.
Well, it's kind of like a spoiler, like a quarter of the way through the book, so it's not like that big of a spoiler.
Yeah, but basically, his character was based off of me, and honestly, I didn't have the character all about me. It's not like he has a YouTube channel and he has this many subscribers. No, it's not like it was like factual things about the character. It was more of his personality. Like, Noah in the book is rich. His father owns a mansion. He's the head of this giant company that controls most of the world's supplies in terms of new technology, and because of that, they're a very rich family. And he is, he's been spoiled most of his life, but the odd thing is that he's not like a spoiled brat. Like, it's not like he's like, oh, I deserve this and that and this. Like, he's very shy. Like, he's a reserved person. He understands the attention that he gets. He understands why he gets the attention, but he doesn't seek it. You'll see the very first scene in the book, Noah is running away from a crowd of paparazzi, like a group of I don't know, I guess you could say the paparazzi, but they're like more like news reporters, and they're trying to interview him because they know that he's, the son of this really rich guy, and they want to know more stuff about him, and he's running away from this, and that's how I start the book, and it's very interesting, and you're like, well, why would Noah run away from this? This is something that, why wouldn't he embrace a situation where he's getting a lot of attention? Isn't that what people in general want? Attention, to be liked and loved and cared for. And, for him, he just wants everyone to go away. He wants to keep to himself. And there's a piece of him that denies certain parts of things around him because he feels safer within himself because of things that he feels. And I guess I can say that's kind of true of my character, but I apply it in different ways in my life. And for Noah, I apply his feelings for different things. He basically feels anxiety about the attention he gets. He feels like he's not becoming anything. Like, he feels like he has all this attention, but he feels like the attention is meaningless. And it will take a conflict that he didn't understand, a conflict that has to do with the aliens that the father studies, that will bring him into this conflict, and he'll realize that he has more of a purpose than he realized. So there is a higher purpose that he was just never aware of. So the way I do it, I had Noah as, he's the main character for the whole book. It's a first-person story, so it's told as I did this, I jumped here. And it's easier for me to do that because think of what I just told you. The character is based off of myself, so obviously it's easier for me to say, I did this, I felt this, I went here, and it's more personal. And when, also a really great thing I'm able to do is the character can think to himself. Because it's told from first person, Noah can think to himself and think about the next, like he can ponder things. Why did that happen? I see this connection, and it's interesting because these are connections I draw in my head about life in general, and I only think them to myself. The great thing about writing is with my main character, I can speak through my main character and put them into the text, and of course I speak through other characters. Now, one thing I did want to address before I went further with the protagonist, I wanted to describe the certain types of characters before we jumped into shaping how you take your main character, because there are different types of characters you can have. There's like static characters and stock characters and round characters and flat characters. Most of the names are self-explanatory. I'm not going to go through a list of every single one, but basically an example of like a static character is a character that's given more detail. A flat character is a character that's not really given much detail. For example, in my book series, Noah has an interaction with a kid who's getting beat up, and you really don't learn anything about the kid that's getting beat up. He's just there, he gets beat up, and then his presence is just to further the plot of the story. You don't really learn anything about his character, as opposed to Harris or Noah, where you learn their motives, you learn things about them, why they did certain things. So a static character is given more understanding and more purpose in the book. A flat character would be more of a character who's just there to further the plot. Their presence isn't notable in any sense for the book and continuing the story in any way, shape, or form. So in your story, and this is also how, like what we said last episode with forming the plot, think of characters. Now, most of the characters you're most likely going to think of, and I'll say this is probably true for a lot of people, they're probably going to be based on people you know in real life. Oh, my best friend. The main character's sidekick is going to be my best friend because he's always been there for me, and I'll make him have all these perfect qualities, and the villain will be that girl I don't like at school, she wears these stupid clothes. I don't know, I'm just making up a scenario, but, something like that. Like something you hate in somebody, you'll portray in a character. Something you like in somebody, you'll portray in that character as well. And how you perceive people is really how you're going to perceive your characters and how your reader is going to see how you perceive it, or how you perceive it in the work and whatever you write, regardless of what you write, because any work you're going to write is going to have characters in it. And there are some interesting twists that you can do. I remember for my creative writing class a couple of weeks ago, a kid wrote a story about a guy who sells his soul to Satan, and it was weird because Satan is like having a discussion with himself, and by the end of the work, you don't really know if there were even two characters. Were there two characters, or was it just Satan talking to himself? And so there are tricks you can do in that regard. I won't, overcomplicate things, but it's just a point of there are different ways you can go with characters. There's no really wrong way you can go with a character. Now, I'll let Pete speak about his opinion about characters before I talk about something that frustrates me that people do with characters, whether it's in a movie, a TV show, or a book series. It's something that people do with characters that is a very incorrect thing to do with a character, and makes me lose a lot of respect for the people who, or the person who authored the work. So I'll let Pete speak first.
I think going into the roles type of perspective, you were saying, I did mention I prefer the title of role over a character, because if you think about it, pretty much every single character that you're going to create, or even scenario that you're going to establish in your book, is going to fill under a role. And these roles go in terms of, they actually have names as well, like it's more media type stuff, where it's viewed upon in different types of media. And I'm going to give you two examples of when these were actually applied, but the main titles are like the hero, which is the protagonist, the villain, the antagonist. Then you have stuff like the reward, which is what the hero will get from defeating the villain. And then you have like the helper, which will aid the hero or give them something. You have the rewarder, which is basically if there is someone that actually gives the person a reward. So for example, like really old, like medieval times would have like, Prince Charming would go and slay the dragon, and his reward would be like the princess. And then like the rewarder might be like the princess's father, because that would have been back in the day when the fathers of the daughters like gave the knights like their daughters and stuff to marry. So you have other stuff, like it kind of gets a bit more complicated whenever it starts going into stuff like the false hero, which is someone that appears good but then turns evil, either in like a twist, or they were evil all along, or you kind of know that they were evil. So an example of this could be found quite evidently in The Dark Knight. Obviously, once again, going back to this one, because I'm sure Chris at least knows what I'm talking about.
My favorite movie of all time. The Dark Knight is my favorite movie of all time in terms of action and plot, so yes.
So, if I was to go through the roles, you'd have the hero as Batman, you would have the villain as the Joker for the most part, and possibly, Harvey Dent later on. So, the movie's been out for a very long time, I'm pretty sure people know, and, the comics, I'm pretty sure people know Harvey Dent's a bad guy.
Yes,
but
yeah.
more or less, Harvey Dent probably wouldn't actually go into the villain slot. He'd more go into the false hero, because at the start you'd think he was all good, like running for like mayor, was it? Mayor of Gotham City? Was he trying to run? Whatever.
Harvey Dent?
Harvey Dent, yeah.
No, he was the DA, the district attorney.
Oh well, there you go. And then he turned out to turn into he did that, and then he turned into another bad guy. The reward isn't a person; it's more freedom for Gotham. And the rewarder is basically defeating the Joker, would pretty much have peace back in Gotham City. And you have like the helper, which might be who's Michael Caine? Alfred, isn't it?
Alfred, yep.
Yeah, Alfred, and possibly who's Morgan Freeman's character?
Fox.
Fox, yes. Okay, so you have all those stuff, and it can even go into the most ridiculous circumstances. Let's say like a washing machine advert. Okay, like you can even apply the roles on here. The hero is like say the washing machine. The villain is the dirty clothes. Like the helper might be like the humans that put the dirty clothes into the washing machine, and the reward is clean clothes, and the rewarder is once again the washing machine. So I mean, it can go. You can literally fit into anything. And I actually, I might try and like shoot some. If we ever get that website thing set up, I might post like an interesting thing about it.
We'll give you an update on that, by the way, at the end of the podcast.
Yeah, so I'll probably post something like that up at some point as well. And basically, my thoughts on protagonists, I pretty much agree with most of the stuff that Chris says about making it like personalized, but I did quite kind of an interesting thing where in my series, there are 4 protagonists, quote unquote. Yeah, there are 4 main characters that you pretty much follow, but the central one, I would say, of the 4 of them isn't me, which is kind of surprising. Pete is Pete. It's actually Matt's character. and that's because Matt, I just feel that Matt's done a lot more in his in his online travels, and so I think that some of the stuff he did do is relevant to people that might watch the series. So people that are fans of Halo might relate to what Matt has done in his previous experiences with Halo and his knowledge about it. Whereas I'm kind of I've kind of written myself that I know about Halo, but I don't really know that much. More than as much as Matt, and that's why I kind of figured that if I made Matt the central character, he's more relatable to the audience, and so it'd probably be a much more enjoyable ride, and the dilemmas that he faces might be more applicable for the people that watch it rather than mine, because I'm more of I'm not really one of the bigger people, one of the standalone people. There are two characters I can definitely think of that really stand out in the series, but I'm not one of them. But that's why I choose to change that, and it's kind of a rare thing to see that when your character... Once again, I'm going to bring up Louis Sachar. In Wayside Stories, Louis Sachar wrote himself into the book, but as the Yard. Who was the Yard person? I don't know what you Americans call it, but it was he was the Yard manager or something, and he was he has to oversee all the people that happen, what happened to the playground and stuff during recess for American, or break if you're from the UK. So you'd call it. But yeah, so that's another case of whenever someone writes himself into the book, but they're not the main focus of it. And our ones are a bit more they're kind of more forceful, where this is my character because I pretty much named them and can characterize them after myself. Other people like Chris may have a character that's like them, but they change a lot about them. Noah, he only has a father, and he's really rich and stuff and whatever. Whereas and also his name's Noah, his name's not Chris.
Yep.
And the same kind of goes for movies. That's why you don't really see directors having starring roles, apart from stuff like Ben Affleck. He had his own stuff going on, and Quentin Tarantino, Reservoir Dogs had that as well. But it's very rare to see that, because they much rather take a stand. They just want to be focused on what they're doing, and that's it, and don't have to worry about themselves being put in stuff. But for authors, it's a much different perspective, because they actually get to write stuff about themselves and stuff, and that's why situations and reactions to events are more easier to write. Hence why my entire series is very easy to write, because I know these three people, for so long that I pretty much know how they'd react to anything. So I think it's very useful for me. And one key thing that people seem to forget about protagonists is they also have weaknesses. Keep that in mind.
Yes.
Your protagonist isn't going to be an unstoppable force. He isn't going to be I am the best and I have no, there's nothing that can stop me. Because then the audience are following their stories. Yeah. They'll get bored, and they'll be well, what's the point of us rooting? We're not rooting for anything, because if we're going to root for him, then at least root for him against something bad. So maybe it's the villain, but if the guy has no weaknesses, then okay, well, that's, there's no point rooting for him because we know he's going to win. Have it the opposite way around, where maybe the villain has no weaknesses, then maybe it might be a bit more interesting, because now it's about the hero trying to overcome this. I'm trying to fight back.
It's the same thing in The Dark Knight. That's what you just said. The Joker seems like an impassible person, nothing phases him. And the Batman's never fought somebody who's like that. So he's struggling, because the Joker keeps pushing him to make the decision to kill him, which is the rule he has to not break. And it's that theme, the whole movie, of him, is he going to do it? And the Joker keeps pushing him because he knows that he doesn't want to do it, but he's going to keep pushing him. And it's that character development and that inner conflict that really makes a story unique and interesting. That's what drives plot, characters. They all warp together, and that's what makes a story so great. That's the element, that key element that makes your story really stand out.
I would say the weaknesses are probably as important as regular characteristics.
Indeed, yeah.
Because they really will shape how your audience views someone. If you have someone that maybe is really we're kind of taking it to kind of extreme lengths and stuff about killing and about powers and whatever. But I mean, just think about something as simple as maybe the person has a problem with smoking. There's their weakness. There's one of their weaknesses anyway. Maybe it might apply in some areas of your story. Then don't really apply weaknesses that don't really matter at all. If you're gonna have a weakness for one of your characters, at least make it kind of relevant. Don't just kind of say, oh, this person sneezes anytime he's around farms, and then never appear in a farm in your story. Then that's just a wasted sentence, or a wasted plot point. So I mean, it's just if you're going to write a character, obviously base them around yourselves, have good characteristics around them, because the audience is going to be rooting for them. But then also have their weaknesses stand out and have their weaknesses really shine. And that's why good stories can do really well against whenever the protagonist looks down and out, like the Dark Knight in the Batman The Dark Knight Rises, he was almost down and out because he fought Bane halfway through the film and got beat.
Yep.
Like, pretty fair and square. And that's why you're rooting for him all the more, because you know that Batman, who previously looked like indestructible in like The Dark Knight and then Batman Begins, even though he couldn't really destroy his nemesis, he still looked quite like
he was
unbeatable.
Broken. He was broken, and this is the genius of Christopher Nolan. He was broken in two ways. He broke his back, and he broke him mentally in how he believed in himself. And he takes that motif, that theme that drives the story. You take this image of breaking someone, you take it in a physical form, and you take it in a form of mentality, and if you can, that is just amazing, in that you're able to take a theme like that and apply it in two different ways, and apply it, and sometimes you can apply it to other characters. It's how this central idea, something that was special to one person, it's now all of a sudden it's shared by a whole bunch of characters, and it's a force that drives the rest of the story, and you're like, wow, this has potential for other things, not just the one thing that I thought it was going to be. Those moments are what give you your substance. In my professional opinion, those are the things that really give you your substance.
And so, I'm trying to think of some other stuff. I also think about like the relationships that the protagonists will have with other characters. I think we'll cover relationships in a different writer's block, I think, because relationships is a very key element, because I mean, we can think about relationships, like going back to the Dark Knight again, like the Joker and Batman, they have a very interesting relationship in which you have the hero and the villain in the same room together. I'm mainly talking about like the crime room or whatever it is,
yes.
like the room whenever like Batman
room.
interrogates them, yeah. And so you think like most cliche things would have, oh, the hero's gonna beat the villain and that's it. In this one, like, it's literally like topped, like it's completely over its head. None of them are fighting at all. Similar to like.
Oh, he does fight. Remember, he keeps beating him in the face, and the Joker says, "There's nothing you can do with all your force and stuff to hurt me." Remember that? He says that too.
Yeah, but like for the majority of the scene, like they don't really do much. Another one would be like Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty in A Game of Shadows and Sherlock Holmes 2, where the villain, the main villain, and the hero, after all they've been through at the end of the film, before they obviously start fighting, what happens is they just kind of sit down, they play a game of chess, and they just drink wine, they talk, and it's like, what? So I mean, interesting relationship like that, like it's kind of like what I said about twist endings, where it can really add a different edge to your story, and it can really like tweak it at all. But once again, that's for another time.
So Pete beautifully led into the point that I'm going to make right now. That is the most frustrating thing that I see with character development, and novices do this all the time. When you portray a character in a certain way, and either halfway or quarter of the way or at the very end, it doesn't matter when it is, the character suddenly changes motives, his mood suddenly changes, something about him drastically changes, and it's not like it's justified. Like if there's a change in him that's justified because of certain reasons, like X, Y, and Z, maybe another character, another plot point, fine. That's completely understandable. If it makes sense in the work, then that's great. Maybe I don't agree with it, but then it's a plot point that the author thought of. However, when it's not justified, when a character changes for a reason that doesn't make sense and doesn't connect with other characters and other thing in the plot, is therefore flawed because of that reason, it drives me absolutely insane, because here's an author who took time to craft this character in such an intricate way, tried to drive a point home. It's almost like I'm thinking to myself, oh, this is what the guy, this is what the author wanted me to feel about this character. The author wanted me to feel this character was this. And then I get to the end of the work and I'm like, I was wrong the whole time. Like, it's almost like something that's so obvious, but it's not obvious to the author, and then they just change it. They automatically, they're just like, oh, yep, the character. It's almost like watching a character grow up, and then all of a sudden he just dies. Like, one day he's just about to do something, and he just died. It's like, what? It's just like a slap in the face. And the greatest example, I know Pete's not going to get this. He will eventually. I'll force him to watch this series, but I don't know if anyone knows this. It's the clip I used to. It's the pump-up clip, and that's why it's a perfect pump-up clip for this. The Legend of Korra, which is a sequel to the Avatar: The Last Airbender series that came out on Nickelodeon a couple years ago. It's a year old at this point. The character, the villain of Amon in The Legend of Korra Season 1 is calculated as the ultimate villain. Here's a guy that hates people who can control the elements. He comes forward with a story that his family was hurt by these firebenders, and that his quest is to equalize the world. People who can control the elements are evil, and there are non-benders who are being oppressed. You see themes of non-benders being oppressed. There's an episode 8, you see the guy Tarlok, and he supports the people who can control the elements. And he's rounding up innocent benders who are innocent, and there's a scene where the Avatar has to make a decision because the non-benders are like, you're our Avatar too, like, don't abandon us. The Avatar supports all the people, regardless if they can control the elements or not. Don't abandon us. And you see the Korra, who's the Avatar, you see her with this conflict. Does she take the side of the benders or the non-benders? Even though the non-benders are the villains, they're creating a revolution because they hate benders so much. Which side is she going to go with? And you see this character, Amon, it seems like nobody who can control the elements can defeat this character. Every single time when you think someone's going to get something over him, he just, nope, he's one step ahead of you. He's so calculated and so ultra-specific in everything he does. And the clip that I showed you at the beginning when I first saw that on TV, my jaw hit the floor. I was like, are you kidding? And the music adds to the effect. Basically, you know, I'm going to, a little bit of a spoiler. Pete, I guess you can clog your ears a little bit because I want you to watch this. But Tarlok is revealed to be a bloodbender, which means you can control the blood in other people's bodies so that you can make them do what you want. So you see this scene where Tarlok is surprised because, oh, Amon's there. Oh, my God, he showed up. And Amon's like, I'm going to take away your blood bending. And and Tarlok's like, you're a fool. I can control you with the blood bending. And all of Amon's guys go down, but Amon keeps walking forward. Like, he's invincible. He can't be fazed by this. And you're like, what? Like, this guy isn't even human. How is he not being affected by this blood bending? Like, he's just so invincible. And he has this phrase where he's like, I am the solution. Like, he's just like, he's the one. He's the guy who will restore everything. It's like, oh my God, this character is... I totally get what the creators are trying to say for this character. And then at the end, again, a spoiler, you figure out that Amon just had this secret the whole time, that he was a bloodbender too. He was a more powerful bloodbender. It's like, what? Like, you destroyed his character. And, of course, you had to have it connect to Tarlok. Like, it just didn't make sense. They ruined his character. All of a sudden, he just collapses. In the final battle with Korra, it's not even a battle. He just wimps out. He wimps out of the battle, and all of a sudden, all the non-benders are like, oh, our leader was lying. All of a sudden, we're going to forget how the benders oppressed us. Just because our leader was lying, we're going to forget how we were oppressed and all these people killed our family members. No, we like benders now because our leader was a liar. What? There's a giant conflict between benders and non-benders, and just because the main character, the villain, is portrayed as a fraud, which shouldn't be how he should be portrayed, that's how you end the series? Like, what? Like, I was disappointed. And, you know, I'm going to blame Nickelodeon because they only gave the creators 12 episodes, and of course, they're going to scrunch for time in 12 episodes. So, fuck you, Nickelodeon. You ruined that first season because of that. That season had the potential to be so great with that character and how it was built up, but you ruined it, of course. So, sorry, I just went on a little bit of a tangent there, but it's frustrating in any work to see a character portrayed in a way that's an opposing way that doesn't justify the work, that doesn't make sense, when a character just has random motives. Motives are just taken out of thin air for no valid reason. It makes no sense, and it doesn't create a good work of art. It really doesn't, and it's frustrating to me, and that's something you have to look for. Every action the character does needs to be justified to an extent. You can't just pull things out of midair. If you're bringing up, that's the thing, this is the plot, this is where character and plot diverge. Think of what I said about the non-bender and bender conflict, okay? You had this conflict going on in this series, but that conflict was ignored, not even referenced and ignored, just to reveal the villain as a fraud. They ignored what they were building off of and went to another plot point. What they should have done was kept the two plot points going on the same path instead of ignoring one, just saying, oh, let's just throw that away. Let's lock it in a closet and hope people forget about it, and then going with this other big plot point that's somehow connected. You can't do that. You have to keep your plot consistent, and you have to keep the characters the driving force of your story. And any story and that's why there are many stories that I hate. I'm going to say I hate the film Avatar, not the series, the animated series. The Blue People movie with fucking James Cameron's giant blockbuster Avatar. Like, it's just silly. Like, it's just special effects that make the movie good. It's like, oh, unobtainium. That's the element we're going after. Like, that's a great idea for an element. It's just like, and then the whole movie, the whole focus of the movie was him training. Like, it was all this emphasis. Hey, here are some special CGI effects of them flying, and let's make that the focus for 4 hours straight. It's just like, what? I'm not watching a movie to see special effects. I'm watching a movie to see character development, which there obviously was none of in that movie. So I'll stop with the giant tirade. I'll get Pete's perspective on what I just said.
Well, I guess you kind of weaved it quite well. I mean, I do definitely agree that whenever you just see something just pluck out of thin air, with no, like, there's a difference between plucking stuff out of thin air for a character and having it build as time goes up. And so if you have like a specific element of a character, and I'm trying to think of an example, but I can't really think of one right now, but you guys probably could. But where maybe a character is reluctant to do something at first, and then as the series goes on, like maybe they can't, or they're too scared, and then as the series goes on, you kind of see their character develop a little bit. Or maybe sometimes it's in secrecy about their character developing in that certain trait. And then towards the end of the product, they actually do the thing. And it's good to see something like that happen, rather than having absolutely no hint about it at all, and all of a sudden that happening. And so, for stuff like that, it just really takes the reader / viewer aback, and they're just kind of like, oh, well, what was that all about? And it really leaves a bad taste in their mouth. I think what you were saying there kind of led us quite well into antagonists, which is the other side. Personally, my favorite character in any story. See, I'm all flipped around because I prefer an ending over the main body, and I prefer an antagonist over a protagonist. But I personally think that an antagonist can really make a product. So
I totally agree with you. That was my point about the character of Amon in the Legend of Korra series, because he's such a cold, calculated villain. He has this power that everyone fears so greatly. And even when you think you've got an advantage over him, he beats you to the punch. Like, nope, I already thought of that. You're screwed. And it's just this ultimate fear that's put into your soul that this guy is going to do these terrible things. And then the ending was the thing that sucked the most, because it's like, oh, he was a fraud the whole time. Ha ha ha, in your face. It's like, what? Like, it's just like, ugh. But
so, I think the things that really make an antagonist is, the key thing about it is they have to have some sort of motive. They're not going to be evil, quote unquote, for just because YOLO, because they have too much hashtag swag, okay? They're not going to be like that, okay? They're going to want to destroy the world, or destroy the peace, or want to kill someone, or whatever. They have to have a motive for it, and that's where, like, good backstory, that's where a good explanation throughout the story goes in. And that's why there's not really much point in having, because if you do have that, it's going to be the most generic, like, villain of all time. Like, oh, here I am, I want to cause evil. Why? Because I am evil. Yeah. And there's no substance in that. Like, no one is going to care for your for your antagonist. And not a lot of people think of it, but people actually care for the antagonist too. They can understand where they're coming from, and it's not a case of, oh, we want this guy to die and we don't care what's going to happen to the character. You kind of do. Because if the antagonist just died, you wouldn't like it. You'd be like, oh, well, I kind of be afraid of something a bit more.
Can I
like
give
maybe
an
one
example?
like a struggle. Give an example.
And from my book.
Oh, okay.
Well, the two main. Well, I spoiler if you don't want to get spoiled on my book a little bit. Well, it's apparent who the main villain of the first book is, and that's TheAireaidLord Augustine. I guess I would say where my TheAireaidLord name comes from. Augustine's the villain. However, you see a side of him that's almost like Amon a little bit. This cold, calculated side of him that he wants things the way he wants them, and he's going to be impassive to get them. But when you see a side of him that when he doesn't get what he wants, he goes like he goes berserk. Like, he's like, no, I'll get it, and then he goes to extremes to get what he wants. And this is a big spoiler. The extreme that he goes to at the end is killing Noah's brother Alex, because he's angry at the fact that he lost something. Like, he keeps trying to succeed. He's a character that's failed so much in life that he's trying to desperately succeed, and the fact that two little humans who are only 13 years old are keeping that from him angers him so much that he's going to extremes to get what he wants. And you see this desperate scene where he so desperately wants to be accepted by his people, because the TheAireaidLord is the leader of all the Areaids, and he feels like he failed his nation, so getting the orb is his way of redeeming himself. So there's this great scene, and I wrote this scene later on, where Noah and Augatine are fighting, and the people rebel against Augatine because they realize Augatine was lying, and Augatine's forced to split the building in half and kill some of his own people. So it's a dramatic scene where you see all of his people falling to their deaths, and Augatine's just almost in tears because these are the people he wanted to serve, and this kid just took that away from him, just made him commit an act he didn't want to do. So then you see he's angry and he fights Noah, and he's you see his fighting is sloppy. That's why in the scene Noah's I was easily able to counter Augatine because his fighting was so sloppy, because he was all going off of emotion. And that's the thing. That's the funny thing, because Jack learns from Augatine, but Jack's character is very much similar to Augatine, because Jack feels like he's been screwed by life. He had this relationship with Noah's mom, and it failed because of things with the father, and Jack desperately wants to get the mom back, and he's willing to kill Noah. He actually ends up shooting Alex, and it's funny because I draw a parallel between Jack and Augatine, this cold, calculated aspect to them, and the fact that when they don't get what they want, they lose that cold, calculated aspect, and they start to lose their minds and go berserk. They can't keep composed. And that's the thing. I'm not portraying my character to be like Amon, where he's always cold and calculated. Where if he failed, if a problem came up, he would go berserk about it. Augatine and Jack are portrayed as being on edge because they failed so much in their life. They're very on edge about what could possibly happen if they fail again. So they're desperately trying to succeed, and they're trying to keep themselves composed. It's almost like, I hate to say this about myself, it's almost like myself feeling very bad or anxious about a problem I'm having, and then when I'm talking to a friend, I'll pretend everything's all right. I'll ask my friend, oh, how's everything doing? And they'll be like, oh, good, but they're secretly trying to keep these feelings hidden, even though they feel something else. So that's the way I portray my villains. And you care for the villain because he says all he's trying to do is support his people and bring peace to the universe, but he's doing it in an extreme manner. It's almost like the villain could possibly be an ally to the main characters, but because he's so crazy, that's impossible. So that's a way I connect my villains, just for some backstory.
I think that the key thing about a villain is, I think it is the backstory for them. Is the execution and stuff and characteristics is all well and good. Same with their weaknesses as well. But I think a backstory to it, and a lot of people like to relate their backstory to the main character. And if it's a case of maybe the antagonist wants the protagonist dead for a certain reason, it's always good to have a good backstory. It says, oh, you did this, or your family did this to my family or to me, and I'm gonna get retribution for it, and I'm gonna do this, that, and the other. So I mean, it's always good to have stuff like that. And sometimes I really agree with Chris of what he has to say, that sometimes it almost seems as if the antagonist could actually be a good guy, but because of the stuff that how he is portrayed and how he just acts, he just can't put himself to do anything nice, and he's always just hateful. But some antagonists can get away with being kind of nice and being kind of evil, but people still like them. So I think some pretty good antagonists, they can also weave in some humor and stuff. They can joke around and play with their food, as I like to say. Once they've pretty much got the protagonist in a situation where they can't get back, they all mess around. Not like the generic James Bond villain where they have James Bond right where they want them. They got a gun to his head and they make a huge flipping speech about it. I mean the people that kind of are, I'm pretty sure you're gonna die, so I'm just gonna joke about it anyway. Or even if they don't even know that and they're still joking around. A very good example of this, I think, is Handsome Jack from Borderlands 2. I really like him as an antagonist because he's really cold and angry, but at the same time he's kind of likable at the same time because he always pulls he's ridiculous, but at the same time
he's humorous at the same time.
Yeah, he's humorous. He makes fun of you at you, and you kind of laugh a little bit at it as well. You kind of feel bad. You're kind of oh, he's a bad guy. I shouldn't be laughing, but you still do, and yet you can see why he's a bad guy. He doesn't he wants the four like what do you call them again? Vault hunters. He wants them dead because he wants the land all to himself. He wants the borderlands all to himself, and so he's going to go out of his way of his robot army to try and destroy you, and just some stuff like that. There, like I do think that in addition to how the character is actually like built, like physically, because I think like the handsome Jack, like I think fighting him is kind of like it's kind of like a dumb like I don't really like it because it just kind of made him look a bit weak. Whereas if you had like a human villain in instead of like an FPS or like I'm looking more at video games here but sometimes this also appears in movies and even books, which is kind of unlikely. But if you're having a really big epic fight scene and the antagonist is a human, then sometimes they're not just gonna have like a fist fight or something because like that's not really creative. Especially like in a video game is a very prime example of this. Like a fist fight with like the final boss really isn't that good unless the game is built around fist fights. If you're playing Call of Duty and you have to fight Makarov at the end of Modern Warfare 3, a fist fight is the most like anticlimactic thing ever. Even though
that's exactly what it is.
Well, yeah, in the later stages of it. But I mean, like, in some other areas of it, like, you can't just have that. So you have to build it up and have all these extended things. Like in Modern Warfare 3, you have to fight through the flipping hotel with like flipping Juggernaut armor and huge guns.
Yeah, it's an epic build up to this big, thing, and you're like desperately crawling forward and
So you have all that stuff going on. Or in other cases, like this is another case in like say Dead Rising is like in Dead Rising 2 in particular, the quote unquote final boss. What happens is that I'm not going to reveal who they are because they're actually different in whatever Dead Rising you're playing, but it's interesting. But anyway, instead of just having once again another fist fight, because Dead Rising is one of those games where it's kind of like, well, where the heck are you going to implement some crazy strategy? But they actually like get on like huge flipping robot armor, and they try and they control like, a huge robot and stuff like that, which some people kind of like for like a final climatic boss battle. And it's because like the final boss, if you're gonna have like a final battle, it's not really gonna be that good if it's just gonna be the two of them fighting. There has to be some ridiculous cause and like to build up the enigma and stuff and build up like, oh, this is so cool and awesome and that's fun action. So of like final climatic like big battle scenes where maybe you have like a team of people and you have to fight off a huge horde of people or whatever, and then you get to like the final confrontation, and that's whenever the final boss can really be shown as to, and then you get the ultimate decision who's gonna win, the protagonist who's moving the whole time or the antagonist.
And that's where you can get interesting. That's where you can throw in twists and other things and
that's like the main twist part. But for the most part, the protagonists win.
Yeah.
Very rarely have I seen. It's kind of funny because sometimes I don't want the protagonist to win. I'm kind of like, oh, I want something a bit different. But then I know if they don't win, I'll be like, oh, what the, like I was rooting for this person the whole way and now they're gonna die. So it's kind of like, you're kind of like in a rock and a hard place because you're like, well, I want to change it up. So you're gonna have to let the protagonist win or have no one win, which is a very interesting case, as maybe happen very often, where both of them like kill each other or something, or there's some shocking twist where someone dies or whatever. But yeah, it's really open to interpretation and very situational. But it's a very opportune time for like to like expand on whatever you're doing.
Exactly. So I think we've said a lot about characters, definitely. And
so like I said, it's going to be a two-parter, so I think whenever we go and come back next week, it's going to, well, no, not next week, the week after.
Yes, yeah, we'll talk about that in just a little bit, actually, because the only other thing I wanted, we do this in each podcast, we have themes that run each time, so obviously the pump-up clip is one of them, and Pete and I alternate on who chooses which. Last week he did Half-Life, and now I'm choosing this one. And I think it's very appropriate for the character thing. I just explained what happened in the clip, and how it relates to the character thing, so that was pretty good. The last segment I want to get to, and then we'll explain the changes that'll be coming in the next couple of weeks. Where we're at in our writing. Now, for me, I did finish the sections that I added to the intro of The Orb, those chapters 3 and 4, and I led it into the fight scene with Harris on the football field. I changed how the football field fighting thing, because it was interesting. As I was looking at how I wrote it, I noticed some of the detail was kind of lacking from how I portrayed the fight scene, and there was a certain vibe I wanted to get from it. So I actually took it upon myself to rewrite some of those scenes, not too dramatically. The story's still the same, but in terms of how the viewer views it, I rewrote it to get some imagery as to how that was supposed to be felt. And I'm just about done kind of it's all the little puzzle pieces. I'm just about done putting the little touches. I'm going to go through it a couple more times, to make sure it's spot on. I'm hoping to have that completely done by this summer so that I'll no longer be working on the orb, like it's done, like I won't go back to it, and I'll save it for if someone wants to view it in college kind of thing. And then I'll work on the Air, which is the second one, which I haven't gotten to yet. But that's where I'm at with my writing. I'm not.
And I haven't done anything since last week, so.
Yeah.
But it's because I'm kind of like stuck now because I've written all the scripts for my series, and now I have to get the equipment, and then I can start actually filming it. I'm getting a week closer to it, but it's still not there yet. So I'll give you some more updates as that happens.
So
website as well.
Yes, the website. I will figure out how to do the widget on the TheAireaidLord.com where I'm going to post each of our podcast episodes for ease of access, and also that's where you can purchase my book. And I'll also try to get a section up there for promoting Pete's Machinima series once we have more news about it. Alright, so the news, so a couple things I wanted to address before we sign off here. Next week, there will not be an episode of the Writer's Block. We're taking a week off. I think it's a well-deserved week off, too. I think having these episodes every single week can kind of get cumbersome for some people. I mean, if you think about that...
It's been a full month now. It's been 4 weeks.
Yeah, if you think about doing a podcast episode every single week, there's 52 weeks in a year, so you're talking about like 52 episodes in like a year kind of thing. And, you know, people do it, like my friend John Rambo does it with his show thing, but they mostly talk about things that happen in their lives. We're talking about topics, covering them, so if we can really figure out 52 topics for a podcast, that'd be pretty ridiculous. But it might change. Maybe an entire podcast episode might not be talking about an entire topic. We might talk about something different, which leads into my next point. I'm thinking, now this is a proposal I'll have for Pete, I'm thinking that maybe the next podcast episode, or the Writer's Block episode 5, or possibly 6, we could read off the entire podcast episode would be reading off what we wrote, because if you guys remember the challenge that we proposed to each other, where I would write something in script form and he would write it in novel form, we would spend the entire episode explaining how we wrote it, why we chose to write it that way, what the story's about, and then we'll actually read the story off, and we'll provide criticism for each other. And I think that would be good enough to cover an entire episode, and it would be interesting for people to listen to, almost like a little reading session, apart from all the tutorial stuff about how to write and stuff. So, Pete, if you're good with that, I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah, I guess so. So I'm just wondering, like,
that's as long as, because Pete's very busy with school. He does go to a...
Starting tomorrow, I'll be very busy with school,
he's been on vacation for 2 weeks, so we've been able to, like, just hang around and stuff, but starting this week, he will have, a full weeks of school where he does get quite a number of work. As for me, I do go to school as well, but my school can be compared to a toilet compared to his, because it's just, I don't get anywhere near the number of works I get, so I do have more free time on my hands to write and do my channel and stuff, as I've mentioned to people in the past. But definitely, I'll encourage him, and I'll do it myself, if we can find that little bit of free time to work on it. And it doesn't have to be long; it could even be short. But if we can do that, that would be really good. And then, obviously, there's the big thing. Next week, as I just said, we're taking a week off next week. Instead, there will be another podcast coming up next week, but it's going to be that April 14th very special podcast I mentioned in my gaming update yesterday. And the two of us will be on it, so I guess you can kind of assume what we're going to be talking about. And it'll be the anniversary of when we first started talking, and really the anniversary of our friendship. And it's an important moment for the both of us, and we will be in detail talking about how it all started. And it's going to be very, very significant. So I would like to plug that, because it's very important to the both of us, and we'll be putting a lot of time into it, both the intro and things we'll be doing in that episode, or not episode, in that podcast. And it's going to be really great. So any closing words before we?
Well, I guess we'll see you guys in 2 weeks' time for finishing off characters, because we only did Protagonists and Antagonists.
Yes.
We still have to do, like, false heroes and how you can betray people, like, look good but appear bad, or look bad and appear turn out to be
so
good.
We'll finish up character, and we'll see if we can maybe squeeze in another topic. We're not sure. The two of us will talk about it and converse. Maybe if we have some sort of writing stuff that we've done between then, we can...
Actually, it's not even 2 weeks, 3 weeks even, because in 2 weeks' time we'll be doing that script novel thing, so, yeah, I'll be in 3, it'll flip me, so we can still go quite a long time left, anyway.
So, but this time works. The only thing for me is that I have a trip at the end of April to California for, like a competition, and the flights, the way it's working, it might be like it's going to be like a late Sunday thing. So like it would be hard for me to get back to film writer's block on that Sunday because I might be traveling most of the time. That is, I could see if I could bring my computer and maybe my mic to do it. I'm not sure. I'll have to talk with Pete and we'll figure that out in the future. That's long-term stuff. The trip itself is going to be really, really stressful as it is. So I'll see what I can do. So, all right. So Pete, I guess you can do the closing.
All right. So once again, I've been Pete Oak, YouTube Pete. I know not many people care much about this because most of the stuff's already there, but yeah, you know where to find me. You know where to find Chris. I've been Pete. He's been Chris, and we're out of here.
Yes. Thank you very much, everyone.